Question is now under Standing Order 36, and I call on Deputy Pearse Doherty, please.
A couple of short news. Madam will be Jaron Tauri on the Mijadela la and Doy and Realtisig. Lab shall Capahan Gudis board the stage. Tranoni new by and ring and Kosha Aragages, August and PAC, Kurtwedish Contasi Ohio and Doy, and there are renew Capahan Hagen Rooney, Robert Watt, Hagen Ring, Slante, Ghanaian, Proshish Morishgart, Lillian Tauri, Mijadela Lish and Doy, her from the Gale. And Yera Catherine Saponishda and Saint Air Board and State Faste. I guess in Ish, a couple of short news to me to canter, Kadian Doi alive shall do Hain, Capahan Kaji, it's Dog Yaganye Kaji Board in the State Day. So, Minister, today the Finance Committee and the PAC will publish its report into the appointment of Robert Watt as Secretary General into the Department of Health. An appointment that you were involved in without any proper process. During the summer, we had the whole Sabone scenario where Fine Gael were appointing a former minister into a state-made make-up job paid by the public purse. And a number of weeks ago, you appointed two friends to the Climate Change Advisory Council, despite a recommendation from the Committee of Climate Action that there should be an open, there should be a competitive and a transparent process attached to such appointments. Now, Minister, cronyism is at the heart of how this government does its business. That's without doubt, and we've seen that very clearly since the summer. But I know that most people would have expected higher standards from the Green Party. But no, that's not what's coming from you. Once you've had the opportunity to dole out jobs for your friends, you have been shown just as capable as Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are at doling out those jobs. Now, I know that the two members appointed are eminently qualified. Their qualifications aren't in question, and that is not the issue. And it doesn't take away from the fact that these two individuals, one was a former special advisor to yourself, and the other was a Green Party election candidate. Now, Minister, these are positions that are paid from the public purse. €10,000 per year, travel and subsistence claims on top of that. They are paid for by the taxpayer, and the taxpayer deserves no less than a transparent and an open and an accountable process, but you let them down in relation to that. Nothing at all precludes the government from making sure that all appointments are transparent and open, but it hasn't happened in this instance, Minister. For 2 weeks we've been seeking clarity on this, we've been asking in relation to the appointment process, but nothing has been forthcoming. So today I'm going to ask you very clearly, why did you pull this stroke? Why did you decide to ignore the Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action? Why did you breach your own guidelines in relation to appointments of process? Why did you believe it was right to appoint a former special advisor and election candidate to this position without any due process? But there's also a wider issue, Minister, in relation to this. The Climate Change Advisory Council has a very important role to play, and that is in terms of guiding the response to the climate crisis, and it is vital that it is independent of government. The advice that government receives is not predetermined or reflective of ideological persuasions. That is crucial in terms of this council. So independent advice is no use if you're simply getting the advice that you want to hear on critical issues such as carbon tax, which are hitting hard on ordinary families while you fail to provide alternatives. So the question I have for you, Minister, is this. Why did you ignore your own government guidelines in appointing these two individuals to this state board?
Thank you, Deputy.
And do you accept that this was just an old-fashioned political stroke?
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, please.
This council was appointed exactly as was set out within the law. It was appointed in the exact same way that the previous Climate Advisory Council had been established. It was appointed going through all the proper government procedures, going to Cabinet, giving advance notice, discussing with colleagues, both within the department and within government. And this council, in my mind, has that correct mix of skills, which not everyone has. They're very specific skills. The individuals you mentioned, as I said, have been recognised in being appointed by previous governments to other similar bodies, the EPA and other bodies. and the case of one of the individuals, unique experience in world energy policy in a whole variety of different institutions that brings real expertise to the Council that I don't believe would have been available elsewhere. And yes, I know a number of people on that Council. If I was to exclude people I've known or worked with in the past 30 years, I think actually it would diminish the skills that we would need. That you do need this balance of different skills, and government and the department and the minister is well placed and best placed, as set out in the legislation, to be able to make that call. And if I was to exclude people on the basis of having worked with me or knowing me in the past, that, as I said, I think wouldn't serve the Irish people well. Because as I think you said, the individuals in questions, the ones you've mentioned, have absolutely the necessary skills. So yes, I stand over the process. I believe it was the correct one and was followed to the letter of the law. And it was law which was passed by this House by a vast majority, including your own party, knowing exactly the appointments procedures that we would follow, which we did follow. And I think the critical thing now is, what does this Council do and how do we work collectively? If Sinn Féin want to turn climate into a divisive issue where you're accusing others of cronyism and so on, I don't think that serves the people at this leap we need to make, this incredible change we need to make. And I think the Advisory Council is actually very well constituted and has done a very good job to date and will actually serve not just this government but the next one. I don't believe it'll be in any way reflect any partisan or other interests because someone might have worked with me in the past, because there's 15 people on it, made up of a whole range of different diverse backgrounds. Some who were previously served in the previous one, I believed it was important to carry over that expertise. Some with real expertise in just transition and social policy in that regard, I believe it was important to include that. Some others, people I've worked with real knowledge of the science, they were needed. Getting that balance, getting that mix, getting the right people, I believe my department and myself as Minister and government acting collectively was absolutely correct and appropriate in how we followed and took that approach. So I look forward to questions about climate. I look forward to questions about what the budgets they've set. I look forward to questions, how are we going to fund this climate transition? If we don't do that carbon tax, where would we get the 5 billion? I'd love to have questions on that, on the substance, because that's what our people, I think, want. They want to know how we make this leap. I don't think they want it to be turned into a politically divisive issue. When the legislation was agreed, the process was followed. And now let's sit down and talk climate and have real discussion as to how we make this huge challenge happen, is what I'd love to question about.
Minister, what the public want is open and transparent government. They want the old-style politics of sorting out people you know, finished with. You've seen the public anger in relation to the stroke that Fine Gael pulled in the summer with Catherine Sapone. They don't like it, and it should be an era of the past. Now, we're not calling into question the qualifications, and you might want to talk about something different, but you pulled a political stroke. You talked about the legislation. We put forward an amendment to that legislation saying that the appointments would be through an open, transparent process. It was rejected by your minister because you say that you have to abide by the guidelines of government, which is the public appointments process. Section 8 of those guidelines say it applies to all boards, commercial and non-commercial. Now, Minister Eamon Ryan, tell me and tell the Irish public why you decided to ignore those guidelines, why you decided to appoint your special advisor and a Green Party candidate to a position in a state board without a transparent, open and fair process, which has actually pulled them into this discussion. They may be the best people suitable for that job, but there was no process. You decided to avoid and evade the guidelines that are there, laid down since 2014. So answer me that question. Why do you believe that you were right to not have any open, transparent and fair process in relation to public appointments? And why do you believe that this Council didn't come under that?
Minister.
Because I said in that process that the way that we had previously appointed the Climate Advisory Council was the right way. That there are some instances where a government department and a minister is best placed to be able to set up this advisory board. It's a very specific board, very different for any of the other commercial or other semi-state boards, all being appointed at the one time, requiring a chair and a board to be in place very quickly for us to be able to meet our climate advisory targets. And in my mind, the process that had been followed previously had worked and should be followed again, which is what we did. And it was a process where, with my government colleagues, there was the full sharing of all the names in the right timelines according to the Cabinet Handbook, done to the letter of the law. And I believe the outcome shows that this was actually the correct approach.
Against the guidelines.
I work with the Public Appointments Service all the time.
Against the guidelines.
But in this particular instance, I believe that the way we legislated for it was the right way to do it, and actually was busy getting that right mix and blend of talent. And I believe we have done that, as you, I think, have recognised. So let's sit down and work with them now and deal with the real issue. Because this is not a stroke. This is to the letter of the law. This is under the Cabinet Handbook. This was done on all due proper timelines.
No, not open,
And
not transparent, not fair and against the guidelines, Minister.
Doherty,
you had an option.
Deputy Doherty, you're out of order.
Okay.
Absolutely is within...
Minister, you're over time too, so thank you very much.
I will conclude now.
Deputy